And here we go with our 1-hour Newsmaker show today. In this half hour, it'll be St. James anesthesiologist Dr. Ismail Mehr. Coming up at 8:30, State Senator Tom O'Mara. Right now, welcoming Dr. Ismail Mehr to the microphones. Hello.
Hey, good morning.
Dr. Ismail Mehr, people locally on Facebook, and I'm sure you've noticed this too, seem, how do I say it, quarantine weary.
Yeah, I don't know if it's weird. I think we've done on this community, our community should be commended. We've done a pretty good job. You're not going to get 100% compliance. People do need to get out here and there, but overall, I think the social distancing message has been out there. But I hear what you're saying. I think people are. It's been going on 2 weeks now, and the cracks are going to start to break. People are, they're seeing. Maybe they're seeing that, hey, well, we don't have the thousands of cases here locally yet, or we don't have this going on, and they're wondering when they can get back to work. I mean, it's going to be tough, right? It's going to be tough for everyone, psychologically, economically, family-wise, work-wise, you name it. This has completely changed the way we live as Americans. And my message to those who are starting to get a little quarantine fever, for lack of other words, is that we're doing this so that we don't end up like New Orleans or end up like New York City or other places. I spoke to a really close, good friend of mine she's a trauma surgeon and also an intensivist or an ICU doctor in New York City. And I shared on my Facebook the exact text message she sent me, and it was apocalyptical. I mean, it was like you could not believe this is the United States of America. This is New York City, and you got to remember the surge hasn't even hit New York City, which means our local cases of infected hasn't even really occurred statistically yet, and it's going to happen. It's happening. Rochester's starting to see the early waves of the chaos. So the only thing proven to help save lives and to lower the surge in the infection is social distancing. So we have to hang in there. From everyone out there, this thing is affecting all walks of life. I think that's really, really important to understand. It's everyone. Everyone's pocketbooks are being affected by this. But, we all want to, make this country great, right, so to speak. But no, that's what we do as Americans. It's about being great. So now's the time for great sacrifice. It's the time for great measures. It's the time for greatness to rise up above all this. Even though we're getting hurt economically, we're getting tired of being home. Think about the greatness that we can bring about from each other, from following what our officials and public health officials and president and governor are asking us to do, because if we don't, the results could be devastating. And I don't want to being a doctor in this community, be in the position that I'm seeing my friends in New York City and Chicago, New Orleans, and even Rochester, where you don't have enough supplies to take care of people, or you have to make life or death decisions based on the age of someone, because that's really happening right now. So we got to hang in there. Social distancing has been shown to help. There is no medication. There is no vaccine. Social distancing is the only vaccine right now. It's the only medicine right now at the moment. Last thing, and I've gone on a little too long with this, is everyone, the stimulus package got approved, right? Be it took some time, there was some back and forth, who cares? It's been approved. And what I really suggest to everyone is sit down and read through it. Talk to your accountant. I think everyone can benefit from some clause or something in that stimulus package. Talk, if you're a private business owner, there's something in there for you. If you're employed by someone, there's additional unemployment benefits. If you have a loan out there, you might be able to refinance to a lower interest rate. All these things are tough. All these things aren't something you plan for. It's not what we plan for as a nation or as a country, but take advantage of that stimulus package and do some research. Get after your accountant and find out what can help you, because we're all going to need help in these trying times. But I think together we can rise and get through this if we stick together.
Dr. Ismail Mehr, I want to ask you, you said earlier, a couple minutes ago in the interview, we have not yet around here reached where it's going to hit statistically. What did you mean by that?
It's really hard to do projections, right?
Sure.
Nationally, we have projections that are changing every day depending on who you're looking at. I typically tend to follow Dr. Fauci. You know, he's the president's first right-hand man and overseeing and modeling this. He said that there's going to be millions of cases today. He was on one of the news shows this morning, Sunday shows, and he's modeling for about millions to be infected and saying that we have to brace ourselves for 100 to possibly 200,000 people who may not survive this. So those are some staggering numbers. But again, he was cautious, said it's a moving target. Locally, the cases are increasing. You've seen Steuben County, the news out in our direct area, increasing in cases. And that's only going to continue to happen. And then what I'm saying is that we haven't seen the surge or the crisis hit locally. I'm hoping that we don't, but my job at the hospital and being a healthcare professional is prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that's where I'm trying to send out to the community also is we need to be ready for the worst case scenario, but we're all hoping for the best. I think we're going to have more cases locally, regionally, Rochester down through. It's just very hard to predict where that's going to fall. I know the University of Rochester is putting together some regional models, hopefully to have those next week. We're not stopping and putting everything on hold just because we want to do that, in terms of healthcare and public officials. There's some reasoning behind that, and hopefully that helps protect us and mitigate the crisis for us locally.
Social distancing, we all know that means keep 6 feet away from people when you're in public. Apex is another word that I've heard. I don't think everybody knows what the phrase apex means. Could you define that for us?
So, apex, if you're referring to apex as in a peak, it all goes back to this whole modeling and projections of when the surge will hit. Surge meaning if you go back to the curve that everyone's seen on TV, number of cases over time from the time the first case was diagnosed. So that means that curve is continuing to go up, and the apex is obviously the top point of that curve. What's being thought right now is the United States has not hit that apex or peak of that curve, which is scary because what we wanted to do was flatten the curve out. So what we're saying is that we will flatten this curve out, but it's not happening right now. It's the results of social distancing from these past 2 weeks is what's going to allow for that curve to start flattening out 2 weeks from now. So it's almost like you don't see the results for a month is what I'm trying to say. What we're seeing is from the last 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I should say probably, is all the cases of transmission that were taking place in our country where we weren't testing, we weren't prepared yet for this pandemic from across all levels of government. Not to point fingers at anyone, let's be honest, we weren't really prepared. We didn't expect it. So that's where you're seeing these numbers rising so fast right now. Because if you remember to my first radio broadcast I did, I think with you a couple weeks back, was the transmission is so fast. It's like no other virus. The WHO put something out, was last week there were more cases of COVID-19 in the world than there was of the regular flu. Because I know a lot have compared, well, it's just like the regular flu on the most part. It's not. The spread is so much faster. And also what we're seeing is the progression of the disease, I think, and I'm not an infectious disease expert. I understand the language and the lingo in the medicine field and everything I'm seeing. We're a little surprised, I think, the U.S. is that maybe the virus is getting a little bit more stronger or virulent because we're seeing progression of the disease process speeding up a bit. People are walking in, breathing, talking, walking, having some little shortness of breath, nothing too crazy, not needing oxygen, and then 8 to 10 hours later, they're gasping for air and being put on ventilators. I had a good friend share some X-rays with no names, obviously following HIPAA laws and whatnot, but sent me X-rays and a case that he saw in Arizona where it was a a middle-aged veteran who he said was robust, physically fit, just came in because he had a little cough and malaise and weakness. So they admitted him thinking it was a regular flu, but they did do the COVID testing as well. When he saw the patient's X-ray, his lungs were completely whited out, or half partially whited out, and he got concerned. He says, "This looks like COVID," even though the test was back. Says, "Hey, I want this guy in the ICU." And within 2 hours of getting in the ICU, they were placing a breathing tube and putting this guy on a ventilator, and now he's fighting for his life, which was just amazing that how fast this thing can progress.
Talking to Dr. Ismail Mehr. Dr. Mehr, this is not a put down of anyone in any way, but it seems that there's been more cases in Steuben County than in Allegheny County or Livingston County. And again, that's not a put down of anyone in any way, but any thoughts as to why that might be?
Hard to say. If my gut thing would be is probably, first of all, we got to look at population density, right? I think that's the main thing. Everyone's like, I've seen people blaming New York City and saying, no, that's the problem here, and the governor and the mayor aren't doing a good job there because there's so many cases. It all comes down to population density, right? One person will infect 3 people, 9, 27, 54. I've said it multiple times. So the closer you are, the faster that spread's going to take place. So Steuben County, first of all, is more populated. So I think that's one reason. Number 2, again, it goes back to the criteria for testing is still a bit strict. So it's because we have to conserve. Yes, we have a lot more tests out there. But let's please everyone understand is we're not testing and we cannot test everyone like we do for the flu. If you walk in and you're coughing and feeling weak, you get tested for the flu and sent home. For COVID, we just don't have enough testing kits out there to do that yet. So that might be one of the reasons the other counties just aren't testing as much. But probably population density is the first thing that I would say.
Talking to Dr. Ismail Mehr here on the Newsmaker show. Dr. Mehr, I think it was last week when you were on, last Monday, you talked about the predictions indicating that in 2 weeks it's going to be worse. Did you mean it's going to be worse for the people who already have it, or that more people will have it, or both?
I think it's both. And I think we've seen that, right? I was here a week ago, Monday, we were maybe 60,000 cases. I mean, I don't remember the numbers probably, but ballpark it somewhere there. Hopefully someone could Google that, and I hope people do, and see what the number of cases in our country are today. It's pretty, it's doubling at our positive cases is doubling at about every 3 days. So it is, so the numbers are increasing. So yes, I was referring to the number of infected, but as the numbers increase, remember 20% of these patients are going to get critically ill. So that means that your people are going to be getting sicker, or the numbers of people getting sicker is going to increase as well. That's what's led to overwhelming conditions in New York City, northern New Jersey right now. They're starting to see it in New Orleans, and they're bracing for it in Chicago and San Fran and L.A. Is that as the number of infected increases, that means that 20% who are going to get critically ill, that subtype in those infected is going to increase, meaning there's more critically ill patients, and then the medical system gets overwhelmed. That's hopefully what we're doing here as a community locally by social distancing. We're avoiding that situation where we don't have to use every single ventilator in Hornell at St. James. We don't have to start doubling people up, who are coming in for regular medical issues, having to move them over to other parts of the hospital. I mean, these are all real medical problems that are taking place and are facing in these places that are overwhelmed. So locally, hopefully social distancing will keep the curve from surging to a point where we're overwhelmed in our capacity.
Talking to Dr. Ismail Mehr. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Stay with us.
Hey! My dad is bringing home the best birthday cake ever!
It was my 5th birthday, and my dad was bringing home the cake.
Should have been here a half hour ago.
The cake never made it, and neither did my dad.
911, what's your emergency?
That was the day a drunk driver killed my dad.
Daddy?
Impaired drivers take lives. Think.
Sponsored by the New York State Governor's Traffic Safety Committee. Aired in cooperation with the New York State Broadcasters Association.
Back on the Newsmaker show with Dr. Ismail Mehr. In this half hour, it'll be State Senator Tom O'Mara coming up after 8:30. Dr. Ismail Mehr, how do you know if you've had COVID-19 already?
Good question. Real good question. And I know a lot of people have that. So the only way you know you've been infected by a virus is testing for antibodies. So when you're infected by a virus, there's everyone knows and heard the word immune system. So our immune system biologically creates its own antibodies. Consider antibodies, we've all heard antibiotics. Just to really simplify it, it's our body's way of fighting off the virus and the infection. So we have antibodies. Those antibodies are like markers. They remain in you after the infection and you've resolved and gotten better. So a way to test for to see if someone's already been infected, and also it can help diagnose if someone's currently infected, is doing a serology testing for antibodies. For COVID-19, currently right now there is no antibody testing. It's being developed. And many places around the world are working on it also, because it would really speed up two things. You could also do a confirmation if someone has COVID-19, because as soon as you get infected, the body starts making these antibodies. And also, it would help tell if someone's had it before. And tying that all together, right now, we don't know perfectly if you've had COVID-19, will you get it next year? Or will you get it again? Is there long-term immunity being built up? So that's being studied as well. Everything's really new. People are like, well, why can't they figure this out? You have to remember, this is a brand new virus. We're right now around the world still trying to take care of the crises and putting all our efforts into testing and figuring out a vaccine and medicines to help slow it down. So the serology and antibody testing is going along, but it's obviously second to the priorities. Most infectious disease and immunologists think there is some level of immunity that it'll have, so that means that hopefully we wouldn't get it again if you've already had it, but they're not certain yet. So a lot remains unknown, but a good question, and they're working on it.
The effects of COVID-19 on the lungs.
Yeah, so it's a respiratory illness. The virus itself has some proteins in it which bind to these receptors that are in your lungs. It has a very high affinity for a specific receptor called the ACE2 receptor, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor. For anyone out there who's medically inclined can look that up. It binds to those receptors in your lungs and then starts wreaking the havoc. Most people, 80%, going to have a mild disease. Their immune system fights it off. They do all right. But for some reason, 20%, they just go down a really bad path where the body's response to the virus. So we might have to understand the body's going to fight off any outside pathogen. You've heard the name pathogen. Anything from the outside, anything foreign that goes into the body's going to fight it off. So the response is hyper accelerated, where it causes all this inflammatory response in people's lungs, and the 20% that don't do well get critically ill. And then the body's response is so hyper accelerated, it actually starts damaging the lungs itself. And what happens is you go into ARDS. It's called adult respiratory distress syndrome. At a certain point, that occurs where your lungs are just being the inflammatory response is so high and so intense it starts damaging your lungs. And then what happens is your lungs start filling up with inflammatory fluids and plasma and just fluids. Think of fluid-filled lungs. That's where people then can't breathe anymore. They're struggling to breathe, and they can't oxygenate. They cannot maintain the acceptable normal oxygen levels in their blood. Because remember, blood goes through your lungs, and if going back to basic biology from 10th grade, blood passes through the lungs. Oxygen comes into your lungs. The blood picks that oxygen up and then delivers it to the rest of the body. Now you have damaged lungs. There's not oxygen there to be picked up, and the blood is going back out into your system without any oxygen in it, causing hypoxia or decreased oxygen levels. This is why these people end up being placed on ventilators and breathing machines, and you hear everyone and mayors and governors across the country panicking about the shortage of having these ventilators for those patients who aren't going to do well. It's really, really tough to manage. ARDS, it's 30 to 40% mortality rate for ARDS. You see ARDS in other conditions as well, not just in COVID-19. It does occur in other things, but the COVID-19 patients go to it pretty fast. The 20% that don't do well, and kudos to those intensivists and doctors out there who are fighting day and night trying to help these patients, because it's not an easy task.
Governor Cuomo spoke Sunday at noon, and the first thing out of his mouth was he wants hospitals to be in better communication with each other around the state. I'm guessing that isn't an issue around here, because most of the hospitals around here, from what I understand, are affiliated with UR Medicine, so you're pretty much all under the same system.
Yeah, so I think what the governor was getting at yesterday was that first and foremost is resources, right? Now, let's just look regionally here. Strong Hospital is getting slammed, and they have a lot of cases, and they need resources. Maybe we have some extra ventilators here in Hornell, or we have some extra something, and we share it. And you're absolutely right. We're under one system, so that's already taking place. There's in the daily meetings from University of Rochester down through all the affiliates, we know exactly what everyone has, what everyone's doing, what their plans are. But on a state level, I think is what the governor is getting at, and it makes absolute sense, is that everyone, we need to know where things are. Because resources might need to get reallocated or moved around within the state to help each other. Also, I know he's mentioned, and I've seen people sort of questioning this, the possibility of moving patients around. It's, when New York City gets overrun and they don't have capacity anymore, patients from there may get sent to hospitals outside of New York City, not necessarily all the way up here, and I don't think that would occur. But
Brian O'Donovan seemed to think that the patients who would be coming in to the Canisteo Street location, if that happens, would be from Rochester.
Yeah, yep, and I'm not even getting at the 411, because that's still
Sure.
That's up to the governor what he wants
Sure.
to do with that. But you could see that a little bit outside of New York City, like Westchester and maybe it's, Valhalla and Liberty, some of those Monticello, areas a little bit outside the city. Maybe you start moving you're transferring your non-COVID patients to those hospitals. You have to understand, normal daily medical issues are going to occur, and again, it comes back to population. Luckily, here in Hornell, we have a smaller population. Our normal, regular patients are not as much as compared to a medical center in New York City, where they have to deal with the diabetics, the heart attacks, the strokes. So it's not just COVID-19 patients that are coming into these major centers. It's your everyday people who need medical help, and that really puts a burden on the healthcare system.
Dr. Ismail Mehr, I hope this question doesn't put you on the spot. The Steuben County Office of the Steuben County Public Health Nurse, Darlene Smith, puts out a list of the places that the COVID-19 patients were before they were diagnosed. One of the places was the St. James Medical Office building up in North Hornell. Now, the reason I'm saying this is I want people to feel safe in going in there, and I'm sure it's been cleaned out by now.
Yes. So, just like the hospital, all the medical offices, not just the medical office building, they're following protocols. They're limiting in the number of patients and people coming in. There's distancing between people coming in. I think if any of you have had a doctor's appointment, you've probably realized you're waiting in the car until you're summoned in. So there's procedures and protocols put in place where people are coming in. So there's social distancing taking place in medical office buildings. My wife, everyone knows in town, she's a pediatrician, and I know her office. People are waiting in the car. No, they're not waiting inside the waiting room and being called in. And again, if a COVID-19 patient had come in because they needed to be seen, right? Obviously, they were pretty sick that they came in,
sure,
and they got tested. Afterwards, as you mentioned, Darlene Smith from the Public Health from Steuben County is notifying the center. That medical office was known probably way ahead of time before the public announcement came in. So they take care of that. And yes, after patients go through a standard procedure right now, wipe everything down, clean everything. I mean, you see it at Wegmans, right? You go to Wegmans and they're taking the Lysol wipes and wiping everything down. So this is the new
Saw
norm.
it save a lot too. Yeah,
It's the new norm. So you don't, rest assured, you don't have to feel worried that, oh, you know what, that I went there too and I got contaminated. Reason we're sharing where people have been is so that you do know, you want to be a little bit more vigilant and monitor yourself for any possible symptoms.
Dr. Ismail Mehr, just about out of time. Anything that you wanted to say that I did not bring out?
No, I think, as a community member, I get it. It sucks to be quarantined. It sucks to be inside. It sucks that my kids can't go out and play with their friends. It sucks that everyone's going to take a hit financially, some more than others. And we've only been in this 2 weeks. It's going to be a bit longer. And let's just stay with it. Let's like I said, let's bring out the greatness in everything and everyone. And I've already seen it in the community. People, doing great things. Let's continue to do that. First and foremost, we have to protect and look after our community and the well-being and health care of our community, that we don't get that surge. And then if every community out there does that, we'll help flatten this curve and we'll get there. But it's going to be a little bit longer. How long? I can't answer that. I mean, the president and his task force can't answer that either. We just don't know. But we do know that social distancing has been helping. So the things we're doing now, a month from now, 2 weeks from now, things will be better, is what we're hoping.
Dr. Ismail Mehr, St. James anesthesiologist, thank you so much.
Thank you.